Hi guys, welcome back. So the last chapter was a long one, and it didn't end very well, did it? All the kids with their dragons got banished to the mainland. They all failed the test. Yeah, Hiccup's mad at his dad because he says he finds the laws more important than his own son. So let's continue and see what ends up happening. Chapter 11. Thor is angry. The storm raged through the whole of that night. Hiccup lay unable to sleep as the wind hurled about the walls like 50 dragons trying to get in. Let us in, shrieked the wind. We're very, very hungry. Out in the blackness, way out to sea, the storm was so wild, the waves so gigantic, that they disturbed the sleep of a couple of very ancient sea dragons indeed. The first dragon was averagely enormous, about the size of a largest cliff. The second dragon was God-smackingly vast. He was that monster mentioned earlier in the story, the great beast who had been sleeping off his Roman picnic for the past 6 centuries or so. The one who had recently been drifting into a lighter sleep. The great storm lifted both dragons gently from the seabed, like a couple of sleeping babies, and washed them on the swell of one indescribably enormous wave onto the long beach outside of Hiccup's village. There they stayed sleeping peacefully, while the wind shrieked horribly all around them, like the wild Viking's ghost had a loud party in Valhalla, until the storm blew itself out and the sun came up on a beach full of dragons and very little else. The first dragon was enough to give you nightmares. The second dragon was enough to give your nightmares. Imagine an animal about 20 times as large as a Tyrannosaurus rex, more like a mountain than a living creature, a great, glistening, evil mountain. He was so encrusted with barnacles he looked like he was wearing kind of jeweled armor, but where the little crustaceans and the coral couldn't get a grip in the joints and crannies of him, you could see his true color, a glorious dark green. It was the color of the ocean itself. He was awake now, and he had coughed up the last thing he had eaten, the standard of the 8th Legion, with its pathetic ribbon still flying bravely. He was using it as a toothpick, and the eagle was proving it's very useful for teasing out irritating little pieces of flesh that got stuck between your 20-foot back teeth. The first person to discover the dragons was Bad Breath the Gruff, who set out very early to check out his nest had fared in the storm. He took one look at the beach, rushed to the chief's house, and woke him up. "We have a problem," said Bad Breath. "What do you mean, a problem?" snapped Stoic the Vast. Stoic had not slept at all. He had lain awake worrying what kind of father did put his precious laws above before the life of his son. But then what kind of son would fail the precious laws that his father had looked up to and believed in all his life? By morning, Stoic had made the awesome decision that he was going to reverse the solemn pronouncement he had made on the beach and unbanish Hiccup and the other boys. "It is weak of me. Weak," said Stoic to himself gloomily. Squid-Face the Terrible would have banished his son in the twinkling of an eye. Loudmouth the Gouty would have positively enjoyed it. What is the matter with me? I should be banished myself, and no doubt that is what Mogadon the Meathead is going to suggest. All in all, Stoic was not in a state to deal with any more problems. "There's a couple of humongous dragons on the long beach," said Bad Breath. "Tell them to go away," said Stoic. "You tell them," said Bad Breath. Stoic stomped off to the beach. He returned again, looking very thoughtful. "Did you tell them?" asked Bad Breath. "Tell it," said Stoic. "The larger dragon has eaten the smaller one. I didn't like to interrupt. I think I shall call a council of war." The hooligans and the meatheads woke up that morning to a terrible sound of the big drum summoning them to council of war, only used in times of dreadful crisis. Hiccup awoke with a start. He had hardly slept at all. Toothless, who had crept in bed with Hiccup the night before, was nowhere to be seen, and the bed was stone cold, so he had obviously been gone for some time. Hiccup dragged his clothes on hurriedly. They had dried overnight and were so stiff with salt that it was like putting on a shirt and leggings made out of wood. He wasn't sure what what he was meant to do, as this morning was the morning he was supposed to go into exile. He followed everybody else to the great hall. The meatheads had spent the night there anyways because it had not been the weather for camping. On the way, he bumped into Fishlegs. He looked as if he had slept as badly as Hiccup. His glasses were all on crooked. "What's happening?" asked Hiccup. Fishlegs shrugged his shoulders. "Where's Horikow?" asked Hiccup. Fishlegs shrugged his shoulders again. Hiccup looked around the crowd, pushing its way towards the great hall, and noticed that there was not a domestic dragon to be seen. Normally, they were never far from their master's heels and shoulders, yapping and snarling and sneering at each other. There was something faintly sinister about their disappearance. Nobody else had noticed. There was tremendous babble of excitement and such a crush of enormous Vikings that not everybody could get into the great hall. And there was a big jumble of barbarians shouting and shoving outside. Stoic called for silence. "I've called you here today," boomed Stoic, "because we have a problem on our hands. A rather large dragon is sitting on Long Beach." The crowd was deeply unimpressed. They were hoping for a more important crisis. Mogadon voiced the general disapproval. "The big drums are only used in times of ghastly deadly peril," said Mogadon in amazement. "You have summoned us here at a horribly early hour?" Mogadon had not slept well on the stone floor of the great hall, with only his helmet for a pillow. "Just because of a dragon?" "I do hope you're not losing your grip, Stoic," he sneered, hoping that he was. "This is no ordinary dragon," said Stoic. "This dragon is huge, enormous, gobsmackingly vast. I've never seen anything like it. This is more of a mountain than a dragon." Not have seen the Dragon Mountain, the Vikings remained unimpressed. They were used to bossing dragons about. "The dragon," said Stoic, "must of course be moved, but it is very big. It is very big, but it is a very big dragon. What should we do, Old Wrinkly? You're the thinker in the tribe." "You flatter me, Stoic," said Old Wrinkly, who seemed rather amused by the whole thing. It's a sea dragonus giganticus maximus, and a particular big one, I'd say. Very cruel, very intelligent, ravenous appetite, but my field is early Icelandic poetry, not large reptiles. Professor Jobish is the Viking expert on the subject of dragons. Perhaps you should consult his book on the subject." "Of course," said Stoic. "How to Train Your Dragon, wasn't it? I do believe that Goober burgled that very book from the Meathead Public Library." He gave a naughty look at Mogadon the Meathead. "This is an outrage," boomed Mogadon. "That book is a Meathead property. I demand his instant return, or I shall declare war on the spot." "Oh, put a sock in it, Mogadon," said Stoic. "With wimpy librarians like yours, what can you expect?" The hairy, scary librarian blushed, and delicate pink shook in his size 18 shoes. "Baggy Bum, hand me the book from the fireplace," yelled Stoic. Baggy Bum stretched out one of his great occupus arms, and picked up the book off the shelf. He lobbed it across the heads of the crowd, and Stoic caught it to much cheering. Morale was high. Stoic bowed to the hordes and handed the book to Goober. "Goober, Goober, Goober," yelled the crowd. It was Goober's moment of triumph. A crisis demands a hero, and he knew he was the man for the job. His chest swelled up with self-importance. "Oh, it was nothing, really," he bellowed modestly. "A bit of basic burglary, keeps me in practice." "Shh," hissed the crowd like sea snakes as Goober cleared his throat. "How to Train Your Dragons," announced Goober solemnly. He paused. "Yell at it." There was another pause. "And?" said Stoic. "Yell at it and?" "That's it," said Goober. "Yell at it." "There's nothing in here about the sea dragonus giganticus maximus in particular," asked Stoic. Goober looked through the book again. "Not as such," said Goober. "Just a bit about yelling at it, really." Said Stoic. It's brief, isn't it? Never noticed before, but it's brief. Brief, but to the point," he added hastily. "Like us Vikings. Thank Thor for our experts." "Now," said Stoic in his most chief-like manner, "since it's such a large dragon—" "Vast," interrupted Old Wrinkly happily. "Gigantic. Stupendously enormous. 5 times as big as a big blue whale." "Yes, thank you, Old Wrinkly," said Stoic. "Since it is, indeed, on the rather large side, We're going to need a rather large yell. I want everybody on the cliff top yelling at the same time. What shall we yell? Asked Baggy Bone. Something brief and to the point. Go away, said Stoic. The tribes of meathead hooligans gathered at the top of the cliffs and on the long beach and looked down at the impossibly vast serpent stretched out on the sand, smacking its lip as it devoured the last morsels of its late unfortunate companion. It was so big that it seemed unlikely that it could be alive until you saw it move like an earthquake or a trick of the eyes. There are times when size really is important, thought Hiccup to himself, and this is one of them. Dragons are vain, cruel, amoral creatures, as I've said. This is a very well when they are a lot smaller than you are, but when a dragon's bad nature is multiplied into something the size of a hillside, how do you deal with it? Goober the Belch stepped forward to lead the yelling, and as the most respected yeller among them all, his quest swelled with pride. 1, 2, 3, 400 Vikings' voices screamed at once, "Go away," and added for good measure the Viking war cry. The Viking war cry was designed to chill the blood of Viking enemies at the commencement of battle. It is a horrifying, electrifying shriek that begins by mimicking the furious yell of a swooping predator, which then turns into the victim's screams of pure terror, and ends with a horribly realistic imitation of the death gurgle as chokes on his own blood. It is a scary noise at the best of times, but shouted all together by 400 barbarians at 8 o'clock in the morning, it was enough to make the mighty Thor himself drop his hammer and cry like a little baby. There was an impressive silence. The mighty dragon then turned his mighty head in their direction. There were 400 gasps as a pair of evil yellow eyes as big as 6 tall men narrowed down to slits. The dragon opened its mouth and let out a sound so loud and so terrifying that 4 of the 5 passing seagulls dropped dead from fear on the spot. It was a noise that made the Viking war cry seem like a fake cry of a newborn baby in comparison. It was terrible, alien, otherworldly noise that promised death and no mercy and everything awful. Everything awful. There was another impressive silence. With one delicate movement of his talon, the dragon ripped through Goober's tunic and trousers from head to toe as if he were peeling a fruit. Goober gave the most unheroic shriek of outraged modesty. The dragon placed the same talon right in front of Goober the Belch and flicked him like a spitball way, way away, over the Viking's head and over the wall's fortified village. The dragon put his vast, crackled old paw to his reptilian lips and blew the Vikings a kiss. The kiss streaked through the sky, scored a direct hit on both Stoic and Mogadon's ships, which had survived the storm and were rocking in the safety of Hooligan Harbor. All 50 of them burst simultaneously into flames. The Vikings ran away from the cliff as fast as their 800 legs could carry them. Goober the Belch had the luck to land on the roof of his own house. The deep layers of soggy grass broke his fall, and he went through them. He ended up sitting stark naked in his own chair in front of the fire, dazed but unharmed. Okay then, said Stoic to 400 Vikings suddenly, looking scared but overly excited. So the yelling doesn't work. They had reassembled in the center of the village, and our fleet is out of action. We have no means of escape from the island, Stoic continued. What we need now, he said, trying to sound as if he was on top of the situation, is for somebody to go and ask the monster whether he comes in peace or in war. I shall go, volunteered Goober, who rejoined them at the moment, still determined to be the hero of the hour. He was trying to sound noble and dignified, but it's very difficult to be truly dignified with grass in your hair, wearing your cousin's Agatha's dress, which was the only thing Goober could find to wear in the house. So, if you look right there, there's Goober wearing his cousin's dress. It's the only thing he could find in the house. Do you speak Dragonese, Goober? Asked Stoic in surprise. Well, no, Goober admitted. Nobody here speaks Dragonese. It's forbidden by the order of Stoic the Vast. Oh, hear his name and tremble. Dragons are inferior creatures who we yell at. Dragons might get above themselves if we talk to them. Dragons are trixies and must be kept in their place. Hiccup can speak to dragon, said Fish Legs very quietly from the middle of the crowd. Shh, Fish Legs, whispered Hiccup, desperately digging his friend in the ribs. Well, you can, said Fish Legs stoutly. Don't you see? This is your chance to be a hero, and we're all going to die anyway, so you might as well take it. Hiccup can speak to dragons, shouted Fish Legs very loudly indeed. Hiccup, the Goobert the Belch. Hiccup? Said Stoic the Vast. Yes, Hiccup, said Old Wrinkly. Small boy, red hair, freckles, who you were going to put into exile this morning? Old Wrinkly looked stern. In order that the blood of the tribes shall not be weakened, remember your son, Hiccup? I know who Hiccup is. Thank you, Old Wrinkly, said Stoic the Vast uncomfortably. Does anyone know where he is? Hiccup, come forward. Looks like you could come in useful after all, said Old Wrinkly murmured to himself. Here he is, yelled Fish Legs, patting Hiccup on the back. Hiccup started to wriggle through the crowd until somebody noticed him and dragged him up, and he passed over everybody's heads and put down in front of Stoic. Hiccup, said Stoic, is it true that you can talk to dragons? Hiccup nodded. Stoic gave an awkward cough. This is an embarrassing situation. I know that they're about to banish you from the tribe. However, if you do what I ask, I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say that you can consider yourself unbanished. We stand in awful peril, and nobody else in this room can speak Dragonese. Will you go to the monster and ask him whether he comes in peace or in war? Hiccup said nothing. Stoic coughed again. You can talk to me, said Stoic. I've unbanished you. So the exile is off then, is it, Father? Asked Hiccup. If I go and kill myself talking to this beast from hell, I'll be considered heroic enough to join the tribe of hooligans? Stoic looked more embarrassed than ever. Absolutely, he said. Okay then, said Hiccup. I'll do it. All right. So the big sea dragons are there. Well, dragon now, because what happened to the other dragon? The bigger dragon ate him like it was going out of style. So they tried to do what? Because they went back to the How to Train Your Dragon book, which we already know has one page and says to yell at him. So there was really no help there. So they went to do that, though. They did try to yell at it. All of them yelled at once. Did it work? No. The dragon just kind of flipped Goober off after ripping his clothes off. So he ended up dressing in his cousin Agatha's dress. They talked Hiccup into helping them. How is Hiccup going to help them? Especially since he was just banished for not being a hero. He's the only person that can speak to the dragons. He's the only one that speaks Dragonese. So his father said he would unbanish him if he did this for him. So he said, okay. Chapter 12. Chapter 12, The Green Death. It is one thing to approach a primeval nightmare when you are part of a crowd of 400 people. It is quite another to do so on your own. Hiccup had to force himself to put one foot in front of the other. Stoic offered to send a guard of his finest soldiers, but Hiccup preferred to go alone. Less chance of anybody doing anything heroic or stupid, he said. Although this is part of the story that the bard tends to focus on a bit where Hiccup was particularly heroic, I do not agree. It is a lot easier to be brave when you know you have no alternative. Hiccup knew in his heart of hearts that the monster intended to kill them all anyways, so he didn't have a lot to lose. Nonetheless, he was sweating as he peered over the edge of the cliff. There below him was the impossibly large dragon. Filling up the beach, it appeared to be asleep. But an eerie singing was coming from the direction of his belly. The song went something like this. Watch me, great destroyer, as I settle down to lunch. Killer whales are tasty because they've got a lot of crunch. Great white sharks are scrumptious, but here's a little tip. Those teeny weeny pointy teeth can give a nasty nip. How odd, thought Hiccup. He can sing with his mouth shut. Hiccup nearly jumped clear out of his leggings when the dragon opened both his crocodile eyes and spoke directly to him. Why so odd? Said the dragon, who appeared to be amused. A dragon with his eyes shut is not necessarily asleep. It follows that a dragon with his mouth shut is not necessarily singing. All is not what it seems. That noise that you hear is not me at all. That, my hero, is the sound of singing supper. A singing supper? Echoed Hiccup, quickly remembering that he should never ever look into the eyes of a large malevolent dragon like this one. He fixed his gaze firmly on one of the dragon's talons instead. This was a mistake. Hiccup suddenly realized that the dragon was holding a herd of pathetically bleating sheep captive under one massive claws. He pretended to allow them to escape, let the poor animals practically reach the safety of the rocks, then picked it up by its wool with a delicate pincer movement and tossed it way up into the air. This was a trick Hiccup had often done himself, but with blackberries. Now the dragon threw back his great head, and the woolly speck fell down into the terrible jaws, which closed behind it with a mighty crash. There was a horrible sound of crunching as he chewed and swallowed the unfortunate sheep. The dragon saw Hiccup watching him in fascinated horror, and he brought this ridiculous, enormous head down closer to the boy. Hiccup nearly passed out as his offensive dragon breath poured out in a disgusting yellow-green vapor. It was the stench of death itself. A deep, head-spinning stench of decaying matter, of rotting haddock heads and sweating whales, a long-dead shark and despairing souls. The revolting steam curled its way around the boy in repellent coils and warmed its way up into his nose until he coughed and sputtered. Some people say you should debone a sheep before you eat it, sneered the dragon confidentially, but I think it adds just a nice crunch to what would otherwise be a soggy meal. The dragon burped. The belch came out as a perfect loop of fire that soared through the air like a smoke ring and landed on the heather surrounding Hiccup, setting it alight so that for a moment he was standing right in the middle of a circle of bright green flames. The heather was damp, however, so the blaze flared for only a few minutes, then extinguished itself. Oops, giggled the dragon evilly. Pardon me. A little party trick. He then placed one gigantic claw on the edge of the cliff that Hiccup was standing on. Humans, however, continued Dragon thoughtfully, humans really should be filleted. The spine in particular can be very tricky as it goes down the throat. As the dragon spoke, he extended his claws and talons, slowly emerging from the thick stump of his fingers and rising up until they resembled nothing more than a gigantic razor 6 feet wide and 20 feet long, with points on the end like a surgeon's scalpel. Removing the human's backbone is a delicate job, hissed the dragon nastily, but one that I am particularly good at. A small incision at the back of the neck. He gestured at Hiccup's neck, swift stroke downwards, and then flick it out. It's practically painless for me. The dragon's eyes lit up with the purest pleasure. Hiccup was thinking very fast indeed. There is nothing like staring death in the face while speeding up your thoughts. What did he know about dragons that could work against the invincible monster like this one? He could see the dragon's motivation page. He had written in his mind, gratitude. Dragons are never grateful. Fear, clearly hopeless. Greed, not a good idea to appeal at this particular point in time. Vanity and revenge could be useful, but he couldn't quite think how. That left jokes and riddling talks. The dragon looked a bit exalted for jokes, but from his manner of talking, he clearly fascinated himself as a bit of a philosopher. Maybe Hiccup could buy himself some time if he engaged him in a riddling conversation. I've heard of singing for your supper, said Hiccup, but what is singing supper? Good question, said the dragon surprisingly. An excellent question, in fact. He threw back his claws and Hiccup sighed with relief. It's a long time since the supper has shown such intelligence. That's generally too bound up with their little life to bother with really big questions. Now let me think, said the dragon as he thought. He forked a protesting sheep at the end of the talon and chewed on it reflectively. Hiccup was sorry for the sheep, but deeply grateful that it wasn't him disappearing down the ravenous reptilian gullet. How should I put it? To a brain so much smaller and less clever than mine, the thing is, we are all in sense supper. Walking, talking, breathing suppers, that's what we are. Take you, for instance. You are about to be eaten by me, so that makes you supper. That's obvious. But even a murderous carnivore like myself will be supper for worms one day. We're all snatching precious moments from the peaceful jaws of time, said the dragon cheerfully. That's why it's so important, he continued, for the supper to sing as beautifully as it can. He gestured to his stomach from where the voice could still be heard singing through more and more faintly. Humans can be bland, but if you have some salt to hand, a little bit of brine will make the taste divine. That particular supper, said the dragon, that you hear singing now, was a dragon rather smaller than me, but full of himself. I ate him about a half an hour ago. Is that cannibalism? Isn't that cannibalism? Asked Hiccup. It's delicious, said the dragon. Besides, you can't call an artist like myself a cannibal. He sounded a bit exasperated now. You are very rude for such a small person. What do you want, little supper? I have come, said Hiccup, to find out whether you come in war or peace. Oh, peace, I think, said Dragon. I'm going to kill you, though, he added. All of us? Asked Hiccup. You first, said the dragon kindly, and then everybody else when I had a little nap and got my appetite back. It takes a little while to wake up completely from a sleep coma. But it's also unfair, said Hiccup. Why do you get to eat everybody just because you're bigger than everybody else? It's the way of the world, said the dragon. Besides, you'll find that you come around to my point of view once you're inside me. That's the marvelous thing about digestion. But where are my manners? Let me introduce myself. I am the Green Death. What is your name, little supper? Hiccup Horrendous Haddock the Third, said Hiccup. And the most extraordinary thing happened. As Hiccup said his name, the Green Death trembled as if a sudden wind had made him shiver. Neither the Green Death nor Hiccup noticed. Said the Green Death. I'm sure I've heard that name somewhere before, but it's rather a mouthful, so I'll just call you Little Supper. Now, Little Supper, before I eat you, tell me your problem. My problem? Said Hiccup. That's right, said the dragon. Your why can't I be more like my father problem. Your it's hard to be a hero problem. Your snotlout would make a better chief than me problem. I've helped the problems of many a supper. Somehow meeting a really big problem like myself seems to put everything else in proportion. Let me get this straight, said Hiccup. You knew about my father and me not being a hero and everything? I can see like that, said the Green Death modestly. And you want to tell me my problems and then you're going to eat me? We're back at the beginning again, sighed the Green Death. We're all going to be eaten sometime. You can win yourself some extra time, though, if you're a smart little crab stick, a few scraps from the burning. The Green Death yawned. I'm suddenly rather tired, he said. You're a clever little crab stick. You've kept me talking here for ages. And the dragon yawned again. I'm too tired to eat you right now. I'll have to come back in a couple hours. I'll tell you how to deal with your problems. Then I have a feeling I can help you. And the terrible monster really did fall asleep this time and snored most heavily. His great claws relaxed and fell open. And the remaining sheep... Sorry, guys. Whew. The remaining sheep, their woolly side trembling with terror, scrambled over the tops of the terrible talons and bolted up the cliff path. Hiccup stood watching the dragons thoughtfully for a second. Then he trudged slowly back through the heather towards the village. Everybody cheered when he walked through the gates. He was carried shoulder high and sat down in front of his father. Well, son, said Stoic, does the beast come in peace or in war? He says he comes in peace, said Hiccup. There were huge hurrahs and heavy stamping feet. Hiccup held up his hand for silence. He's still going to kill us, though. All right, that's where we're going to stop today. So Stoic, they send Hiccup to talk to the great beast. He, not really nice and not really mean. He's just hungry. But he says something very kind of profound, if you ask me, which is we're all going to be eaten someday. So he's going to eat Hiccup, and when he dies, worms are going to eat him. Kind of a weird thing to say, but he does get asked if he comes in war or peace, and he says... He said peace, but he's still going to eat everybody. And... they had a conversation about Hiccup's problems. He's going to help him, but right now he's too tired, so he needs to come back in a couple hours so he can solve his problems and then eat him. And then he's going to eat the rest of the village after. So Hiccup goes back, and they're all happy to see him. They ask him what the dragon said. He tells them. He said he come in peace, and they're all happy. And then he holds up his hands, just quiet them down, and says, "But he's going to kill us. He's going to kill us anyways." So that's where we had stopped this time. Kind of got really interesting. We're over halfway done, it looks like. Oh yeah, we are really close to done. So we'll probably, next video or so, 1 or 2 videos, and we'll be done with this book. So see you guys next time.